The air inside the studio was thick, not with excitement, but with a heavy tension that made every breath feel heavier. Producers exchanged quick, sharp hand signals behind the cameras, their faces taut with nerves. Seasoned anchors gripped their cue cards tighter than usual, their eyes darting anxiously between the clock and the set. The audience, carefully selected and told to remain calm, shifted in their seats, some biting their lips, others sitting on the very edge, unable to hide their anticipation. Everyone knew something was about to explode, not in noise, but in raw, unpredictable power. The kind of moment that no one could script or rehearse. The kind of moment that, once it happened, would leave a mark no one could erase. In this charged atmosphere, the pressure was palpable. The red light hadn't even flicked on yet, and already the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for the storm. On one side of the table sat Donald Trump, a man whose name echoed through every corner of America and beyond. Weathered by decades in the spotlight, he carried with him the weight of power and controversy. His presence was commanding, his confidence unshakable. To many, he was a symbol of authority, to others, a lightning rod for division. His words, sharp and provocative, could ignite fires in seconds. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, young, poised, and fiercely determined. Unlike Trump's battle-hardened armor, Jasmine's strength came from a deep well of courage born of struggle and conviction. She wasn't here for theatrics or applause. She was here to speak truth and stand for justice. Her calm demeanor masked an unyielding spirit that refused to back down no matter the odds. In this room, two worlds collided: the seasoned force of entrenched power and the rising voice of a new generation unafraid to challenge it. Their contrasts, age and youth, experience and idealism, fire and steady resolve, set the stage for a clash that would captivate a nation. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly, a calm presence amid the brewing storm. Inside, however, a fire burned, a fierce determination forged through years of fighting injustice. She understood the stakes. She knew that every word she spoke tonight could ripple far beyond the studio walls, stirring support, but also sparking fierce backlash. The weight of media scrutiny and political pressure pressed down hard. Critics from all sides whispered doubts and warnings, trying to shake her resolve. Yet Jasmine remained unshaken. Her strength wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, rooted in a steadfast belief that standing up for what's right was worth every challenge. She didn't seek the spotlight. She didn't crave applause. She was here because her community needed her voice steady, fearless, and true. This was her moment, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The tension finally snapped when Donald Trump, eyes fixed on Jasmine Crockett, unleashed his sharpest barb of the night. Without naming her directly, his words cut through the room like a blade. Maybe if some of these young politicians stopped trying to go viral and started learning their place, this country wouldn't be in such a mess. The room fell into a stunned hush. For a moment, no one breathed. The carefully controlled atmosphere cracked as uncomfortable laughter rippled from some in the crowd, nervous, unsure, trying to mask the shock. The moderators scrambled to steer the conversation away, sensing the spark that could ignite the entire discussion. But all eyes were now locked on Jasmine. The air was thick with anticipation, everyone waiting for her next move. Then came the silence, heavy, thick, almost unbearable. The kind of silence that stretches seconds into what feels like forever. Cameras kept rolling, capturing every millisecond as the studio seemed to hold its breath. You could almost hear the heartbeat of everyone present, faster, louder, pounding against the stillness. The audience sat frozen, some biting their nails, others staring wide-eyed at Jasmine, waiting, wondering what she would say next. The moderators glanced nervously at each other, the tension so palpable it was almost visible. No one dared break the silence. The air was charged with anticipation and unspoken challenges. And there she sat, calm and composed, the eye of the storm, steady, unyielding, ready. Inside, Jasmine felt a storm raging, a fierce battle between silence and speaking out. Every instinct screamed to stay quiet, to avoid the spotlight, to sidestep the fallout. But deeper than fear was a stronger force, her sense of justice, her commitment to those who had no voice. Her mind raced, weighing the risks, the consequences, the unknown. What if this moment changed everything? What if it cost her everything? Yet beneath the doubt burned a steady flame of courage. This was more than politics. It was about dignity, respect, and standing tall when it mattered most. In that suspended second, Jasmine made her choice. She would not be silenced. She would speak calmly, firmly, with purpose. Because some moments demand more than silence. They demand courage. Jasmine lifted her hand gently, signaling the moderators to pause the conversation. Her voice was steady, calm, but charged with undeniable power. She locked eyes with Trump unflinching, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Mr. Trump," she said clearly, each word deliberate, "I know you're used to people clapping for nonsense. But respect isn't handed out based on age or title. It's earned and given. With your record, you might want to sit this one out." Every syllable landed like a hammer blow, precise and unyielding. Her facial expression held no anger, only quiet confidence and unwavering resolve. Her calmness made the words cut deeper, delivering a sting that no shout could match. The room fell into stunned silence. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's reaction, a blink, a slight lean back, a nervous chuckle as he reached for his water. For once, he had no quick comeback. The audience's collective breath caught. Some whispered, "Whoa!" The raw, unfiltered truth had pierced through the usual political posturing. This wasn't just a comeback, it was a statement that shifted the entire room's energy. For a full second, maybe two, the room was frozen. No one moved. No one breathed. It was as if time paused to catch its breath. Then came the reaction, not an eruption, but a wave. Someone near the front let out a sharp, "Whoa!" Not dramatic, just honest. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances, mouths slightly open. You could hear someone gasp. Even the camera crew, trained to remain still, subtly shifted in their stance. It wasn't chaos, it was clarity. That sentence, Jasmine's comeback, cut through layers of political noise like a bell tolling in a cathedral. People didn't cheer, not yet. They just felt it. Deep, real, like something important had just happened. It was the kind of moment that doesn't need music or editing. The silence carried it. The stunned expressions confirmed it. Everyone in that room, from interns to anchors to political veterans, knew they'd just witnessed something that would be replayed, debated, and remembered for years to come. Donald Trump blinked, just once. But in that moment, it said everything. For a man known for his quick comebacks and dominant stage presence, the pause was deafening. He leaned back slightly, reached for his water bottle with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes, and let out a dry chuckle, the kind that says, "I felt that." For a split second, he looked less like the bulldozer of American politics and more like a man caught off guard in his own arena. His allies at the table, two conservative analysts, shifted uncomfortably. One stared down at their notes, the other cleared their throat, eyes darting toward the moderator as if silently pleading for a reset. But there was no smooth recovery. The room had turned. The power dynamic had shifted. Trump tried to regroup, straightened in his seat, and forced a grin. "Tough crowd tonight," he said, attempting to lighten the mood. But it landed flat. The audience wasn't laughing. They were still processing. The momentum had moved, and it wasn't in his favor anymore. This wasn't just a pause. It was a track. And in politics, even the smallest crack can split open a legacy. It didn't take long. Within hours of the broadcast, Jasmine Crockett's comeback had exploded across the internet like wildfire in dry brush. The clip hit 11 million views before sunrise, and that was just on TikTok and X. By noon, it was trending on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and even LinkedIn. People didn't just watch it, they reacted. Thousands of stitches, duets, remixes. Some added dramatic music, others freeze-framed Trump's blink. Influencers reposted it. Podcasts pushed emergency episodes. College professors added it to their lectures before lunch. Memes flooded timelines. Jasmine's unflinching stare turned into a new symbol of defiance. Screens across America, phones, laptops, TVs, all lit up with the same moment. A woman calm but fierce, cutting through the noise with just a few words. It wasn't just viral. It was seismic. This wasn't about left or right anymore. It was about power, respect, and the courage to speak up. As the clip tore through the internet, the country split in two. One half hailed Jasmine as a hero, a voice of clarity in the noise. They called her courageous, composed, the face of a new generation. People wrote essays, created fan art, printed her quote on t-shirts. Young women, especially women of color, shared emotional videos. She said what we've been thinking for years. Some even said it gave them hope for the first time in a long time. But the other half, they were furious. Online forums lit up with anger. Disrespectful, entitled, a nobody trying to trend. Trolls flooded her comment sections with snake emojis, racial slurs, and warnings. Know your place. The irony didn't go unnoticed. Some messages were subtle, others were chilling. You're not as untouchable as you think. Better women have disappeared. Capitol Police began monitoring her social media. Her staff filtered thousands of messages, some full of hate, others overflowing with gratitude. The contrast was whiplash-inducing. But through the chaos, one thing was clear. Jasmine hadn't just shaken the room, she had shaken America. While the world spiraled into noise, Jasmine chose silence. No tweets, no press conferences, no Instagram stories, just stillness. She spent 2 days tucked away at her godmother's home in Fort Worth, phone on silent, news alerts turned off. Outside, hashtags trended, headlines screamed, podcasts analyzed her every breath. But inside that quiet house, Jasmine sipped tea, stared out the window, and listened not to the media, but to herself. It wasn't avoidance, it was survival. She read a few messages, the supportive ones, and let them sink in. One from a 19-year-old in Detroit said, "You gave me the courage to speak in my political science class for the first time." Another from a retired teacher in Alabama simply said, "Thank you for your voice." But beneath the calm, the weight pressed heavy. She didn't regret what she said, not for a second. But the pressure, the attention, the knowledge that millions were now watching, dissecting, judging her tone, her posture, her existence, that part was exhausting. And yet she stayed still, not because she was weak, but because silence, when chosen, is its own kind of strength. Before the cameras, before Congress, before the moment that went viral, there was a little girl in Shreveport, Louisiana, watching her mother work double nursing shifts and her father fix engines in a garage so small he couldn't stretch his arms without hitting a wall. Jasmine didn't grow up around power. She grew up around persistence. Money was tight. Vacations didn't exist. Some nights, dinner was cereal and silence. But her parents never complained. they worked, they prayed, they held her to high standards not in grades but in character. At just 9 years old, Jasmine saw her first act of injustice. A classmate blamed another child for stealing lunch money. Everyone believed the lie, except Jasmine. She knew the truth and stayed silent. That night, her mother didn't yell. She just looked Jasmine in the eye and said, "If you know what's right and stay quiet, you're helping what's wrong." That stuck. It cut deep. It was the first time Jasmine felt the weight of silence, and it would be the last time she let it win. That single lesson lit a fire, the kind that doesn't burn out, not even when the world tries to drown it. While others chased six-figure salaries at corporate law firms, Jasmine Crockett walked a different road. After earning her law degree from the University of Houston, she turned away from glossy buildings and corner offices and walked straight into overcrowded jails, community legal clinics, and courtrooms where hope felt like a stranger. She took pro bono cases no one else would touch, defending single mothers, wrongfully evicted teenagers facing jail for petty theft, men beaten during arrests and left without representation. Her clients didn't have money. Some didn't even have families. But they had her, and she showed up every time, prepared, precise, unafraid. In court, she wasn't loud, but she was lethal. Her questions were like scalpels, her arguments sharp as glass. Judges twice her age respected her. Prosecutors learned not to underestimate her. But it wasn't about ego. Jasmine wasn't trying to be the smartest in the room. She just refused to let injustice walk out the door unchallenged. This was where her voice sharpened, not in campaign speeches, but in courtrooms filled with quiet desperation. And it's where she learned the greatest truth of all. Sometimes the law is fair, and sometimes it needs someone to fight like hell to make it fair. The courtroom had shaped her, but the system, it still needed shaking. In 2019, when a seat in the Texas state legislature unexpectedly opened up, community leaders came knocking on Jasmine's door. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't a politician, she was a fighter. But the truth was that fight needed a bigger platform, so she ran. And from day one, the resistance was fierce. They said she was too blunt, too combative, too young. Party insiders whispered behind closed doors. Local power brokers backed safer candidates. Even some allies warned, "You'll never win unless you tone it down." She didn't listen. She knocked on every door, walked every block, held town halls in barbershops, parking lots, and churches. She spoke not in sound bites, but in truth. And when the ballots were counted, she won, by more than 10 points. Not because she bent, but because she didn't. And she didn't stop once she got to the Capitol. Jasmine challenged the quiet deals, the watered-down bills, the good old boys club that expected her to play nice and fall in line. She didn't. She didn't run for office to be liked. She ran to fight for those who were never invited to the table. The applause faded. The headlines slowed. But inside the Capitol, the tension only grew heavier. At first it was subtle. Colleagues who used to nod in the hallway now avoided eye contact. Once friendly lawmakers offered tight-lipped smiles. Invitations to working lunches disappeared. It wasn't overt hostility, it was colder than that, professional distance wrapped in polite silence. Then came the calls, private meetings, closed-door sit-downs with party leadership, no aides, no cameras, just phrases like, "This moment is bigger than you. We need unity right now, not waves. Let's keep the temperature down." Jasmine listened, she nodded, but inside she heard the real message, "We're uncomfortable with how loud your truth was." They didn't say the words directly, they never do, but the message was clear. Stay visible, but not too visible. Be bold, but not too bold. Speak, but only when we say it's okay. Jasmine had spent her whole life fighting to speak when it mattered. She wasn't about to let politics rewrite that. Then came the shadows. A plain envelope showed up at her DC office, no return address, no postage. Inside, a torn magazine page with her face circled in red, and a sticky note with 6 chilling words. "You're making it worse. Stay quiet." That same day, a staffer noticed a man sitting in a truck across the street from Jasmine's district office in Dallas. He didn't hold a sign, didn't yell, he just sat watching. Capitol Police were notified. Security was increased. Officers began monitoring her home. Her routes were quietly adjusted. The threats weren't loud, but they were close. Her inbox, a war zone. Messages that started polite turned venomous halfway through, some anonymous. Others signed with real names, real addresses, as if daring her to respond. And through it all, Jasmine kept moving. She kept showing up. She kept walking into rooms where she was watched, measured, judged. But at night, when the lights dimmed and the voices stopped, the weight pressed in. Not fear, loneliness. Because fighting back, especially as a black woman in power, often means doing it without a crowd. And still, she didn't break. She breathed. She stood. She endured. Just when the weight felt heaviest, the voices began to rise, not in anger, but in solidarity. A freshman congressman from New Mexico left a handwritten note on her desk. "You said what I've been too scared to say." A seasoned lawmaker from Georgia who rarely spoke in caucus leaned in during a hallway vote and whispered, "Don't stop. Some of us are just waiting for the space you're opening." But it wasn't just Congress. Students from Howard University, UCLA, and community colleges across the country flooded her inbox. Videos poured in, young women choking up on camera saying, "You reminded me that it's okay to speak even when your voice shakes." A group of first-time voters in Kansas City sent a photo, all holding signs that read, "I found my voice because she used hers." Political science clubs debated her clip. Activist groups used her story to train volunteers. Professors played her words in lecture halls. Church youth groups turned it into a discussion about strength without shouting. In the midst of silence, Jasmine had lit a spark, one that caught fire across generations. And in that fire, a new kind of courage was born, the courage to speak even when you're not invited. The cameras moved on, the headlines changed, but Jasmine didn't. 3 days after the viral storm, she returned to her district. No fanfare, no press conference. Just a folding table, a stack of local petitions, and a line of neighbors waiting to talk. She smiled, listened, took notes. A woman in a wheelchair told her, "You gave me back hope." A high school senior asked, "Do I need to be brave like that to make change?" Jasmine laughed gently. "You just need to show up, again and again." She held town halls, visited churches, sat in after-school programs where kids called her "that lady from TikTok" and then asked her about housing rights. And when reporters chased her, she didn't hide, but she didn't play into the noise either. Her answers were calm, clear, focused. When asked if she regretted her words, she said, "I regret we still live in a country where that moment had to happen, but I don't regret showing up." Politics for her wasn't about applause, it was about people. And so she walked on, not for the headlines, but for the stories still unfolding in living rooms, classrooms, and community halls. Stories she knew deserved a voice, even when it shook the room. Not every moment in history is planned. Some crash through the noise uninvited, raw, unforgettable. Jasmine Crockett didn't script that moment to go viral. She didn't rise to speak so people would cheer. She spoke because silence in that room would have been louder than truth. And in doing so, she reminded all of us the power of truth isn't in how loud you shout, but in how deeply it lands. She reminded us that courage isn't a lack of fear, it's choosing to speak despite it. And now the question comes to us. When it's your turn to speak, will you stay silent or will you rise? Because truth is waiting, and the world is always listening. Some people watch the storm, others walk straight into it and still stand tall. Jasmine Crockett didn't just challenge a man, she challenged a system, a history, a silence that had stretched for too long. And in doing so, she became more than a headline. She became a reminder. You don't need a podium to speak truth, just a spine. In every town, in every generation, someone must choose to follow the script or to break it, to stay quiet or to call out the lie. And tonight, as you close this video, we leave you with this. When good people speak, even in whispers, the world begins to change. If this story moved you, imagine how many more are still hidden. Subscribe to AZ Exposed, where we tell the stories the world tried to bury. Stories that challenge the norm, awaken truth, and remind us of who we are when we refuse to back down. Sometimes history doesn't knock. It storms in unannounced and puts a microphone in your face. When Jasmine Crockett stood up to power, she didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for every voice that's ever been dismissed, ignored, or told to know their place. And here's the truth we all need to remember. Courage is not about being the loudest in the room. It's about speaking when it would be easier and safer to stay silent. In a world where injustice hides behind titles, money, and tradition, your voice is your weapon. Use it. Because sometimes one sentence can shake the system, and one person can inspire a generation. If this story moved you, don't scroll away. Subscribe to AZ Exposed and help us shine a light on the truths they don't want you to hear. Together, we give voice to the unheard. We expose what others fear to say. And we remind the world, justice starts with a single story.